writing, that I find that there is such a huge difference between the writing I do in the morning upon waking and when I do free writing at any other time of the day, as it doesn't feel as free later on in the day, because things have happened that maybe I'm reflecting on, and maybe I've inhabited a persona during the day because of what I'm doing, and that seems to come out. So as you say, I love, they say when you say, I surprise myself, because I find that, because I think, who wrote that? As I'm writing it, because I think I was not aware that that was there. Whereas later on in the day, I don't get that same sense of surprise.
Should we talk a little bit about structured journaling? What does that look like?
Let's go there, because structured journaling is one of my favorites, and it's a foundational element of my morning routine most mornings, and it was certainly one of the elements that enabled me to really shift my own life for myself when I was struggling. And there's a huge body of evidence around, and so I suppose structured journaling might well be about doing the opposite of what you're trying to do with free writing, which is to go with the speed of your thought processes and allow a stream of consciousness. And this is actually about slowing things down and being more intentional. And so there's no right and wrong as to the kind of questions or reflections that you might use in your structured journaling, but we suggest that things like a reflection on gratitude, so today I am grateful for, and stopping to really think. This is not a speed exercise. So when I train executives and leaders around this, I say that is not a speed exercise. It's not who can write 5 things the quickest. This is about really sensing into the things you feel grateful for and writing them down in a more descriptive, meaningful way that helps to re-evoke those feelings for you. And that's a super powerful place to start, because it suddenly shifts the whole of our mindset away from what am I not happy with, what don't I like, to actually what do I appreciate and what do I already have. So I think one of the quotes we use in the book from Melody Beattie around gratitude is, gratitude turns what we have into enough, which I think is a beautiful place to start your day.
So among prompts you recommended in the book, there's today I'm grateful for, today I'm looking forward to, today I commit to.
Yeah.
This gets to goal setting, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of evidence, right, that goal setting helps us feel more in control, perform better, and just get more done, be more intentional and focused. And so is this something that you would do in your structured journaling each morning, is basically set out a certain number of achievable goals, and what are the characteristics of the goals that we're looking to set down?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I guess what I like about this sort of sentence stem of today I commit to is it's quite open, so you could interpret it in the context of writing really clear goals, things you want to achieve, things that are specific, that we can measure the impact of, that they're achievable, that they feel relevant, realistic, that there's a sort of timing to them. So we might want to be, particularly if we're someone who lacks focus, we might want to be very, very clear about that kind of goal setting. But today I commit to, you could also interpret more around how you're going to show up. So for me, it cuts into one of our other practices. We talk about the to-be list. So sometimes I'd say, today I commit to being, present in all of the meetings that I have, to being well prepared, to being enthusiastic. And so it might combine a mixture of ways I'm going to be and how I'm going to actually be in my being, as well as things I'm going to do in my doing. And certainly for me, that commit to, I would use that particularly to write down things that I knew that I might otherwise allow to slip off my agenda. So the things that I don't really like doing, the things that scare me a bit, the things that I tend to avoid. And that process, we know that a process of setting a clear intention and writing it down dramatically increases people's probability of following through and actually delivering on that.
I've heard the to-be list reference, but it's not something I'd ever really engaged in. And you actually offer in the book a range of adjectives that you might select from if they don't come to mind.
Yeah.
Right? I need to be focused, I need to be assertive, I need to be empathetic, I need to be patient. And based on your goals for the day in front of you, you might have a slightly different aspiration for how you want to behave. Your to-be list is going to change each day to some degree.
It also takes account of maybe those transitions from work to personal life, that you might have a really full-on busy day, very stressful, very important meetings, and then you're going out and seeing your kids play football or meet friends, and you don't want to take that same professional, assertive agenda, that persona, and so it's thinking, okay, how do I switch? How do I want to be when I'm with my friends? How do I want to be when I have that date night with my partner? How do I want to be when I get home and my kids are really excited to see me? Do I still want to be in work mode playing hardball? Or do I want to be fun? Do I want to be playful? Do I want to be affectionate? Do I want to be attentive? And I think that intentional shift can be so powerful, because we can take our previous behaviors with us without thinking about it, and then afterwards we think, I didn't really enjoy that because I didn't allow myself to enjoy it because I was still in work mode.
Coming up after the break, we hear from Next Big Idea Club curator Daniel Pink.
Here's my extremely unexciting morning routine.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm DC Marshall.
Hi, I'm Mita Malik.
We are the co-host of the Brown Table Talk podcast, where we discuss how to help women of color thrive in their workplaces.
And we invite allies to join us to help women of color win at work. We have a seat waiting for you. Subscribe to Brown Table Talk wherever you enjoy podcasts.
My approach to my days was pretty dramatically changed by a book called When, The Scientific Studies of Perfect Timing by Daniel Pink.
Yeah.
You're familiar with it? Yeah. And he's one of our 4 curators of the Next Big Idea Club, as you know. What that book caused me to much better appreciate and start to track in my own daily experience is how profoundly my focus and my ability to get things done and my willpower erodes over the course of the day.
Yeah.
Certainly into the afternoons, and then maybe you see it rise again in the late afternoons. And so this caused me to be much more protective of the first 3 or 4 hours of the day. I've realized that 80% of the critical things I need to get done, I get done in that period of time.
Yeah.
So from a scheduling perspective, I'm much more protective of those early hours. And then I've also come to appreciate, another point Dan makes in When, is that as you're in the mid-afternoon, when you're at a low in terms of focus, you actually can be better at doing things like free association and brainstorming. It's a great time for meetings, generating new ideas, but you're probably less likely to do the deep analytical work. And understanding those really meaningful changes in our capabilities over the course of a day, for me, has been quite profound. And so what I really try to do with my goal setting is basically have a smaller, more achievable set of a small number of highly important things that I'm going to knock out in the morning, and then treat the rest as kind of extra credit. And there's always a lot of things we don't anticipate. That's part of the problem. But when I try to put times next to activities, I end up quite discouraged because I rarely execute it as I'd like to.
Absolutely, and I guess one of the things in that is that we need to allow some breathing space, ideally, in our schedules on the anticipation that there will be things that we don't anticipate coming up. But as you say, playing to when we work best or produce best on different things is really transformational.
Well, I actually reached out to Dan Pink this morning as I was furiously preparing for our conversation, and I asked him, I said, Dan, it's been a few years since you wrote When. I'm interested to know how you spent your days. And here's what he said.
Here's my extremely unexciting morning routine. I don't wake up early or really late. I wake up between about 7 and 7:30. On most days, I shower almost immediately, which really does help me wake up. On many days, I actually try to get some light, some morning sun for 5 or 10 minutes. I often do that by standing on this tiny maple balcony that's outside of my bedroom. I know that I should wait 60 minutes or so before I have my first cup of coffee. I wrote about that in When. I frequently do not follow my own advice, so I go downstairs, I gulp a couple of cups of coffee, usually 2 decent-sized cups of coffee. Small breakfast, usually just Greek yogurt or maybe a little bit of a granola when I'm feeling kind of wacky. And I also read parts of newspapers. I am the last person on the planet who still subscribes to print newspapers, 3 of them in fact, so I read a few of that just to sort of get my mind going. But I try to get into my office, which is the refurbished garage behind my house, by about 8:30. On writing days, I give myself a word count. Nothing massive, maybe 600 words, depending on where I am in a project, sometimes more. And I don't do anything else until I hit my number. Sometimes I do that by 10 a.m., other times it's noon or 12:30 or worse, but I don't do anything else until I reach that magic figure. I don't even bring my phone with me into the office. I try mightily not to answer email. Once I've reached my daily quota, I am liberated to do other stuff. Then I come back and I do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next, because consistency beats intensity.
All right, Toby and Kate, what do we think of Dan Pink's schedule?
Well, I would say, given how successful Dan is and the amazing contributions he's made to the world, I'm not going to criticize his schedule because it's obviously working for him, and I think that's very much our approach, is find what works for you. We didn't ever want to set out a rigid or prescriptive approach, and so we back everything up by science. But as the science, there's always going to be people who are at either end of the bell curve, who it either really works for or doesn't work for at all. And so it's experimenting what works for you, and he's found something that works for him. And that may change though, if that works for him now, but maybe 5-10 years, if he has different priorities, maybe he'll have a different routine, and maybe something like meditation and journaling is more interesting.
I think maybe after he listens to this podcast episode, he may give the journaling a try.
I would love to think that we had influenced Dan Pink.
He's a scientifically minded fellow, and I think journaling strikes me as something that most of us could benefit. Meditation, as you say, is a practice you recommend, and that many people really benefit from. Do you see meditation as something that is more beneficial in the morning, or would you say do it whenever it fits your schedule?
It's an interesting one. I personally find it's more beneficial in the morning, partly because I think you're riding on that liminal zone between sleep and the mind having woken up and really ramped up and engaged fully in the day. Because I find if I try and meditate in the day, I can meditate again later evening. It's much harder for me to settle and to really rein my focus in, my concentration in. I also think the morning is helpful because I know that if I don't meditate in the morning, I will have the intention of meditating, and unless I actually make an appointment with myself, put it in my diary, this is when I'm going to do it, it doesn't happen. I get to the end of the day and go, oh, I didn't meditate today.
And this is precisely, I think, the importance of the morning schedule that you're getting to in this book, is that the things that we schedule, that we make rote, repeatable rituals every morning of our lives, there's a very high probability that once we get that into the algorithm of how we start the day, we're going to do it. Whereas if you schedule something for the afternoon, the probability drops precipitously, at least for me.
And for everyone it does, because other things get in the way. I mean, we start to be pushed and pulled around by all of the demands on us. We don't live in isolation, we live in relationship. We have other needs to serve other than our own as we get pulled into our day. But what we can do is to create some time for ourselves to do the things that we know are going to help us first thing in the morning, and meditation, as you say, can be a really valuable part of that.
Meditation strikes me as a practice that is somewhat binary, and that there are, I know many people whose lives are transformed by meditation, and I also know a decent number of people who just have tried and just cannot get it to take. Is it your view that everyone on the planet could benefit from meditating, or do you see it as a tool that maybe is more valuable for some people?
I would say that everyone would benefit from this shift in sort of consciousness. I often talk to people and they'll say, yeah, I can't meditate, but when they describe the experience they have and the presence they have of walking their dogs in the woods, I'll say to them, that's a mindfulness meditation that you're doing. There are some slight tweaks to that to amplify the benefits, but meditation doesn't have to be sitting with your legs crossed.
And I think I've got a slightly different take on it as well, which is that one of the things that we know we are becoming de-skilled at is focused attention. Through things like our smartphones that constantly distract us, we're used to constant jumping around.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're doing with meditation is training, or certainly some forms of meditation, is training our attentional control. And I think I tell this story in the book, but I think one of the reasons that people say they can't take to meditation is because they think that in order for it to be having any use, you need to be somehow reaching this state of nirvana where you've got a totally still and silent mind. But that really isn't the case. For most people, when they endeavour to meditate, what they are really getting the learning from is that process of having the intention to focus on something, our mind getting distracted, getting lost in a train of thought, noticing that distraction, that train of thought, bringing it back to the focus of our attention, which might be our breath, non-judgmentally. And that whole process of focusing, getting distracted, refocusing, getting distracted again, refocusing again, all of that is your meditation practice, not just the moments of clarity, silence and stillness. And I say to people, it's called a practice, not a perfect.
Let's talk about exercise, which, you know, if we think of the morning as this kind of sacred space where we can pick a small number of things and make sure that they happen, I have learned begrudgingly over the course of many years that if I run every single morning, my brain works better, I'm calmer, it positively impacts my mood, and I can do it sometimes in, like this morning, I was under a little time pressure this morning preparing to talk with you all, and so I did a 10-minute series of 6 sprints, and in those 10 minutes, my entire day is transformed. It strikes me that this is one of the most powerful tools that we have.
What we believe and offer is, again, not a one-size-fits-all. So for you, you've learned that running and really pumping your body up works. I think what is important for people is that they do something that connects them with their bodies. Many of us have learned to live in ways that are quite disembodied. We almost operate as if all we are as a human is something from the neck up, and we engage a lot of our brain and our thinking. And so something that connects us with our body, but also gets our body moving, to start to limber us up, to start to maybe shake off some of the sleepiness, shake off some of the stress, are likely to make us fitter for the day ahead. So we're not fitness and exercise gurus. And maybe this will appeal to Dan Pink then. Some of our, suggestions around exercise are things like dancing to one of your favorite songs in the morning. It's exercise for those that don't like traditional exercise, but things that get you up, moving, physically tuned in, connected. Yeah.
And I think it's getting moving. So, I work with a lot of clients who are bereaved or have serious or life-limiting illness, so movement may be difficult for them, and so it's finding what you can do. So for some people that might be, rather than going for a run, it might be just going for a walk, and that walk might be walking to, if you have a garden, walking to the end of your garden and back. That might be enough, but it's just something that starts to get the blood circulating. And we know that motion shifts emotion. As you said, when you run, you notice the difference. I know if I don't do a morning walk or morning yoga, I notice the difference. Not just in how my body feels, but how my mind works and how my emotions are. It really does make such a big difference. And so it's, one of the practices we include in there is making your bed, which can seem, people think, movement, but actually for some people that's quite a physical act, plumping the pillow, shaking shit. That might be all that they're capable of doing, So they get the movement, they also get the sense of achievement. So it's being realistic.
If you have weighted blankets, maybe the making of the bed would be a little more of a workout. You're gonna have a.
Oh yeah, I like that.
I've realized if I'm listening to a book or a podcast or taking a phone call, I could be walking.
Yes.
And so I've started to take phone calls on a walk.
Yeah.
And there's very small, easy things, and you feel better.
Absolutely, and I've said that to clients. If they say I haven't got time, I'll say, well, could you schedule your calls? Could you do them outside? Could you walk? So that you're using that time to get the daylight, to get some exercise, but you're still getting the work if you feel you can't find that half an hour otherwise.
This brings up a topic that I think is relevant for so many of us, which is when we're talking about changing our morning schedule, which might be something that some listeners, and certainly I'm considering here. Any kind of change, any kind of consistent change to our lives is not easy to accomplish. But you have this wonderful metaphor about walking through a field of grass.
Yeah.
Right, and how the changing behavior is initially challenging but becomes easier. Do you want to share that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And I use this often with clients that I'm working with. It's this idea that we have these well-worn paths within our brain, and so it's like imagining yourself walking into a field, and in the field there's long grass, but there's a clear path worn ahead of it, and so the automatic thing to do is to walk down that well-worn path. But if we want to do something different, we have to actively, very clearly make that choice at that choice point to walk a different path, to move towards a different destination through treading a new path. And of course, the first time we do that, that's going to be really difficult because there's going to be no pathway there. So we're going to have to start to really forge that pathway, and we're going to have to be quite committed to going through, moving the grass down. But the next time we move into the field, the well-worn path is still going to be very attractive and easy to go down, but there will start to be a faint line of a new path. And if day after day, time after time, we start to choose that new path, over time it will become well worn, and in fact the grass will grow back over the old route. And that's exactly what's happening in our brain with the neural pathways. You know, we used to have sayings like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We used to think we were sort of...
Oh, man.
This podcast was recorded at
1:16 p.m. on Thursday, July 20th.
Things may have changed by the time you hear it. Okay, here's your show.
We were literally just talking
Show
about
us talking about that.
it's too hot.
Too hot. Bring a fan. Bring a fan.
Hey there, it's the NPR Politics Podcast. I'm Susan Davis. I cover politics.
I'm Frank Ordonez. I cover the White House.
And NPR correspondent Joel Rose is with us again. Hey, Joel.
Hey, Sue.
So you just got back from a trip to the southern border. The last time we had you on the podcast, we talked about how the Biden administration was expecting this big influx of people seeking asylum at the border because the pandemic-era restrictions were being lifted. How did that all pan out?
That seems like a really long time ago.
Yeah.
It did not pan out exactly like that. I mean, we saw a big influx of migrants right before the end of the pandemic restrictions. But then, to the surprise of a lot of observers, the numbers really plummeted and have stayed relatively low for the past 6 weeks, 2 months since the Title 42 restrictions ended. We just got official numbers for June this week, and illegal border crossings were down a lot. They're down 40% from the month before, so it really has gone the other direction in a big way.
To what do they attribute that? Especially because we were literally just talking about the heat, and obviously in that particular region of the world, it is especially hot right now, and weather is one of the factors that can affect things like this, right?
Historically, yeah. Summer is a time when the border crossing numbers usually drop. There are other changes, though, in terms of policy at the border that may be a big factor here. The Biden administration would certainly argue they are. One of the big ones is this new tool called CBP-1, this mobile app that migrants use to apply for an appointment at ports of entry, which is like the first step toward seeking asylum. So 40,000 appointment slots per month are being filled by migrants seeking asylum through the ports of entry instead of crossing illegally. So that's one big change. There's also this new rule that took effect in May that makes it much harder to get asylum if you cross illegally between the ports. So big policy changes there.
Can we back up and talk about this app for a minute? Because this seems like a pretty new way of doing business at the border. So migrants would have to stay outside of the U.S. And does it also presume that migrants have access to smartphones? It's a
Yes, and that's one of the complaints that you hear from immigrant advocates is that it favors migrants with phones, with good phones, with better internet access. There's all kinds of inequity, they would say, baked into the system because it is so focused on having a phone and having the ability to use it.
I mean, Joel, I've found your reporting really great when you're down there. I mean, you spoke to a lot of asylum seekers on the other side of the border as well. I mean, what are they saying?
It's sort of a mix. I mean, some people are having success with the app. I don't want to lose that. I mean, some people are having success, but a lot of people are waiting a really long time for an appointment. Initially, you know, there were only 1,000 a day across the whole border. They've raised that number to about 1,400 now, but the demand is way higher than that. There are still maybe 100,000 migrants within a few miles of the border waiting for a chance to seek asylum. So there's much more demand than there is supply. And so you just have a lot of migrants waiting and logging onto their phones every day, trying to get one of these kind of coveted appointments. And for those who aren't getting them quickly, it's really frustrating, and they feel like they're in this very vulnerable situation.
Just kind of reminds me a little bit of when the Trump administration kind of moved in, and obviously some of the advocates are comparing some of these policies to Trump administration policies. And at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a very much a wait and see. Like, let's see how these new policies from the Trump administration pan out. Do you get a sense that some of that is going on here, where they're just waiting to see how these new Biden policies shape out and, you know, things could change?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. When there's a big policy shift at the border, typically migrants do take a step back and assess, what does this mean for me? What am I hearing from my friends? What am I hearing on social media? What am I seeing happen in front of me? Yeah. And it takes a little while for things to settle out. And I think administration officials also say that's what they think is happening, right? To some extent, migrants are just trying to understand this new landscape. And, I think that's one reason why you don't see the administration jumping up and down about this big drop in crossings, because they know it might be temporary. They know it might just be, people trying to understand what the new lay of the land is.
We've talked a lot of numbers. You said maybe 40,000 people a month are getting processed through the app, 100,000 people waiting at the border. We also have in recent years heard a ton about historic levels of people crossing the border. Where are we now in terms of these numbers? It's been so politicized. Can you just sort of give us a broad view of the number of people we're talking about?
Sure. Right now the numbers are low. The border crossings in June were the lowest since February of 2021, so basically since the Biden administration took office. In between, though, we did see record numbers of apprehensions at the border in both 2021 and then again in 2022 that are only now starting to come down to sort of more historically normal levels. So when you hear that there were record numbers of migrant apprehensions during the Biden administration, that's true. There's a factual basis for that.
The fascinating thing about this new Biden policy is it's one of those policies that seems to have just made everyone angry. It's being challenged in the courts both by immigration advocates and hardline immigration opponents. Explain some of those challenges and what their court process looks like.
Yeah. Well, so the Biden administration's policy has carrots and sticks, and I know I've said this before, but it's true. It's really the best way to describe it. There's like the carrot of using CBP-1 to apply legally, and then there's the stick of not crossing between the ports of entry, or making it harder to get asylum if you cross in between. So depending where you are in the immigration debate, you either hate the carrot or you hate the stick. And so the immigration advocates are suing to block the stick, right? To put this new asylum rule on hold. They had a crucial hearing in court just this week, and that judge could rule very soon, on whether the new asylum restrictions hold up. On the other side, immigration hardliners hate the carrot, and they feel like CBP-1 is letting lots of migrants into the country who shouldn't be allowed into the country. So they're also going to court to try to challenge that part of it. Those cases are still a little further away, but yeah, there's something in this policy for everybody to hate.
All right, on that note, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk about the politics of immigration.
Hey, a quick plug for our latest bonus episode. We're trying out a new trivia game.
I have a couple thoughts in my head. Ron, can I have a hint?
Yes, your hint is Asia.
I feel like that's not the most helpful hint.
I agree, that's not the most helpful hint.
No, I have a couple. I know the name.
Check out that episode and find out how you could have a chance to play if you're an NPR Politics Podcast Plus listener.
This message comes from Wondery. Season 3 of the hit podcast Suspect is a story of two victims, one murdered in cold blood, one imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or binge all 8 episodes ad-free on Wondery Plus.
And we're back, and Franco, immigration has not been a central issue in the nation's political debate, but a lot of things are going to happen in the next year or so, including a presidential election, that could change that.
There's no question about that. I mean, I do think the administration deserves credit, and look, I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, we were talking about the end of Title 42, and we were all writing headlines about, like, this could cause major chaos. It's, what's happened since has really kind of blunted that political talk. It's blunted, pushback from Republicans. That said, there's just no way that this is not going to come back and be a big issue. And I would argue that it's going to be one of the most closely watched issues ahead of next year's presidential elections. And that's because Republicans are not going to allow it to be any other way. I mean, you have the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, one of the leading Republicans. You got, obviously, former President Donald Trump. These are huge issues for these leaders who are going to continue to bring it up. And it is such a salient issue for the Republican base. Because for Republicans, it's the same status quo. There's still an open border to them. There's still problems at the border. Nothing has really changed in at least their political discourse. Republicans are already getting ready to, take action against leading members of the administration.
Sure.
The Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, Alejandro Mayorkas, they're, potentially likely to, start impeachment proceedings because of their dissatisfaction with how the administration is handling the border.
I think the immigration point is so important within the confines of Republican politics in particular. It doesn't animate Democrats the same way, but in a few weeks we're going to have the first Republican presidential debate, and Donald Trump was an immigration hardliner, and anyone trying to get any oxygen, you can't run to the center on immigration in a Republican primary, and it's pretty hard to run to the right of Donald Trump on immigration because he was already pretty tough on the issue.
Yeah, no, they're trying to run to the right.
Explains a lot of DeSantis's positioning.
Exactly. I mean, he's got some. It's pretty amazing, some of the positions that Ron DeSantis is pushing. I mean, there's also obviously the flights of flying immigrants from Florida to states and cities run by liberal politicians. You know, I fully anticipate that this will be part of the Republican debates. This is going to be an issue, and I think that is also another reason why the Biden administration has been kind of tempered about this, because they too know that this is going to likely to be a political issue, and the best strategy for them is for it not to be talked about, for it not to be a discussion, and for this not to be in the headlines.
As a matter of policy, Joel, immigration had a potentially brief window, maybe 10, 15 years ago, in which there was real movement in Washington to try to do something big and comprehensive, and that collapsed. And now, you know, we talk all the time on this podcast about polarization, and immigration to me seems like one of those issues where the two parties have just moved further and further apart, not only to define what the problem is, but what do you do about the problem?
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are some areas, I mean, if you look at polling, there are some areas, some sort of policy solutions in the middle that are fairly popular, like doing something for Dreamers, like a pathway to citizenship for them. These are undocumented immigrants who were brought to the country as children. There's some other sort of agriculture workers, yeah, I agree with
workers.
that. And border security. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on border security that actually goes pretty well. You could imagine some kind of deal, but I think the base of both parties would reject it,
yeah.
You know?
All right, well, Joel, I'm sure we're going to have you back on this podcast to talk more about immigration as the election plays out. Thanks for doing it, as always.
Sure.
I'm Susan Davis. I cover politics.
I'm Frank Ordonez. I cover the White House.
And thanks for listening to the NPR Politics Podcast.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Can you hear me?
Okay, Kate, I am so sorry to keep you waiting. Today's been a bit of a crazy day over here.
No problem. Yeah, you've had some announcements. I heard you met the president. How'd that go?
It was good. He's excited about the merger guidelines, so.
All right. So you're all set up and we're ready to go?
Yes.
Yesterday, we spoke with Lena Khan. She runs the Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, the agency that's tasked with enforcing antitrust laws. Basically preventing business monopolies and protecting consumers. And under Khan, the FTC has been busy, taking a tougher stance on big business deals.
The FTC suing Microsoft to officially block its planned deal with Activision.
The FTC is accusing Meta of trying to exert undue dominance in the metaverse. The Federal Trade Commission is suing to block NVIDIA's $40 billion ARM merger from going through.
Do you think that there's a monopoly problem in the U.S. economy right now?
The president said that markets across our economy have become extremely consolidated, that those markets have become dominated by incumbents, and that this lack of competition is bad for consumers, it's bad for small businesses, it's bad for citizens. And so that was a mandate that the president laid out.
But as the FTC has tried to execute that mandate, by trying to block some deals in court, the agency has had some big setbacks. Welcome to The Journal, our show about money, business, and power. I'm Kate Linebaugh. It's Thursday, July 20th. Coming up on the show, a conversation with FTC Chair Lena Khan.
This episode is brought to you by Natrol. With school just around the corner, time to think about getting your kids' sleep routine back to routine. Thankfully, there's Natrol Kids Melatonin. 100% drug-free. The formula helps safely soothe your child to sleep on those nights they need a little extra help, so they wake up rested and ready for the school day ahead. Shop now at Natrol.com. This product helps with occasional sleeplessness. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent diseases.
When you were younger, is this the job you wanted?
school and college wanted to be a journalist.
Ah, it's good being a journalist.
I actually simultaneously applied to law school and a job at the Wall Street Journal.
No way. Did you get the job?
I did, yeah. I had the option to come be a commodities beat reporter.
Amazing. Lena Khan didn't take the job at the Wall Street Journal. Instead, she went to law school. While she was there, she published a paper in the Yale Law Journal about Amazon, and it got a lot of attention. Her paper argued that Amazon had gained enormous power in the market and was damaging competition. She argued that the FTC and its antitrust laws had failed when it came to Amazon, that the company should have been restrained, and it wasn't. Khan went on to teach law at Columbia, and when Biden took the White House, he tapped her to lead the FTC, signaling that the administration was taking a more aggressive posture.
There is empirical research showing that in certain markets we have seen a decline in competition, that's correlated with higher markups, with lower rates of innovation or lower rates of quality improvements. So that is all research that we take into account. But from an enforcement perspective, we really look at every case and every matter based on the facts before us and assess how the laws apply to that context.
Last year, the FTC and the Justice Department filed more merger lawsuits than they had in any year for over a decade. But they've lost some big ones. In December, the FTC tried to block a big Microsoft deal. Microsoft, which makes the gaming console Xbox, was trying to buy video game maker Activision. It wanted to expand into cloud gaming, and Activision owns popular video games like Call of Duty and Candy Crush. The FTC said the merger posed a, quote, clear threat to competition because Microsoft could make games exclusive to the Xbox. Microsoft said it would keep selling the games to competitors. And last week, there was a decision. A judge ruled against the FTC. The FTC is now appealing. How do you reflect on that loss? What's the lesson you take away?
So this case is still pending, and so I'm not going to be able to talk in substance about it. Of course, when we do suffer setbacks in the courts, we look very closely at the opinion to assess where we fell short and use that experience to inform our future efforts, as well as our assessment of whether an appeal is warranted.
Have you picked the wrong battles?
So look, we only bring cases where we believe that there is a law violation. The complaint that the commission voted out in that matter lays out what the commission's viewed as the likely legal concerns that would be raised from this transaction. So I'll let that complaint speak for itself. One of the key things that the complaint does discuss is the future of this market and how, especially in instances where you have newer markets developing, the antitrust agencies have a particular mandate to protect that competition and make sure that we're not seeing walled gardens and that we're instead preserving open, vibrant competition.
Does it make you rethink future actions?
So again,
what is the value you take from attempting a case like this, even if it doesn't fall in your favor?
So we study the outcomes very closely to determine where we fell short. Oftentimes judges are providing more clarity in terms of the law, and so that can be useful, especially in instances if some of these cases are involving newer markets. There's an opportunity for courts to be applying antitrust statutes that go back decades in new contexts, and it can be important for enforcers to be seeing how courts are applying that law in new contexts. One case that we brought last year where we got a decision this year was our efforts to seek a preliminary injunction to block Meta's attempted acquisition of Within.
Khan is referring to Meta's purchase of a virtual reality fitness company called Within Unlimited. The FTC tried to block the deal in court, arguing it would reduce competition. But the FTC lost and has said it won't appeal the ruling.
That was another instance in which we lost But that decision by Judge Davila really laid out in great detail how some of these traditional principles, including the mandate the agencies have to protect future competition and protect potential competition, how those principles apply in digital markets.
So you've just released a new set of draft guidelines for mergers and acquisitions. What's new in these guidelines?
So the merger guidelines are basically the enforcement manual that the Federal Trade Commission and the Antitrust Division use to lay out how it is we go about analyzing deals and assessing whether they may violate the law.
Merger guidelines have been around for decades, and every so often they're updated to take into account changes in the market and important court decisions. The last time these were updated was in 2010. The new guidelines spell out the kinds of mergers that the FTC and the Justice Department say may break the law. Why is it necessary to update the guidelines now?
Our economy has changed significantly since 2010. Markets have changed since then, and so it's good practice for our enforcement manual to be kept up to date to reflect current market realities as well as the current law, and so that's why we undertook this revision.
And in these guidelines, what has changed?
So there are a few things that have changed. One thing that these guidelines do is lay out some particular considerations that are warranted in special contexts. So we have one guideline that lays out how we think about competition involving platforms.
Platforms, like Uber, Amazon, or Google. Companies that operate websites and apps that connect people with each other and with various products and services.
And so we lay out in some detail different ways that competition occurs in these markets.
What is it about the economy today that is out of step with how the previous guidelines were?
So the previous guidelines did not explicitly discuss platforms or digital markets, and there's been a whole lot of learning over the past decade about the ways in which competition occurs in the context of platforms. There's also been a ton of economic and empirical research over the last decade surfacing the fact that labor markets are often concentrated, and that concentration can have an effect on wages, where workers are making less when they don't face as much competition between employers or less competition in job opportunities. And so the guidelines also directly lay out how it is that the agencies will think about whether a merger may lessen competition for labor.
You're releasing these guidelines after the FTC had a loss in the Microsoft Activision case. Do you think they will help your cases going forward?
Look, so, we were disappointed in that outcome, and I'm not really able to talk about ongoing litigation. The goal of these guidelines is to provide guidance to the public, to antitrust practitioners about how it is that the agencies go about doing their work and doing that analysis. Historically, courts have also looked to these guidelines, and so we're hoping that these guidelines can be illuminating and instructive for a whole set of entities out there.
Coming up, we asked Chair Khan about another investigation into ChatGPT.
This episode is brought to you by ServiceNow. Businesses today are facing tough choices. Do you cut costs or drive growth? Solve for today or build for tomorrow? Do you satisfy your shareholders or your customers? Now, you don't have to choose. With the intelligent platform for digital business from ServiceNow, you can say yes to unifying your existing systems and yes to accelerating growth. See how ServiceNow can help you put yes to work. Tap the banner to learn more or visit servicenow.com.
The FTC's been investigating ChatGPT and is examining whether the AI app harmed people by publishing false information. Have you used ChatGPT?
I have, yes. When it was introduced and everybody was having fun asking it questions, I also had the opportunity, and it's, a remarkable technology. It's just incredible to see how many strides have been made.
Do you remember what you asked ChatGPT?
I think I had seen someone mention that you could, that ChatGPT was good at putting together a claim, disputing an insurance bill, and so I think I was dealing with that situation, and so gave it that prompt.
And did it work?
It gave me something to work with for sure.
What prompted this probe, and what are the harms you see in AI?
So I'm limited in being able to talk about any ongoing investigations, but we've laid out some of the concerns that we are seeing. So the FTC has both a competition mandate, but we also have a consumer protection mandate where we are charged with prohibiting unfair or deceptive practices. We've already been seeing how some of these AI tools are being used to turbocharge fraud and scams. So some of these technologies are basically enabling scammers to disseminate fraudulent content much more quickly, much more cheaply, and on a much wider scale. And so we're already seeing through our complaint database instances in which these technologies may be used to promote fraud. On the competition side, these moments of technological disruption are so important, and there is no doubt that AI as a technology presents huge opportunities for advancement, huge opportunities for injecting innovation into the market, but we need to be making sure that those opportunities for innovation are preserved and that some of the technological incumbents are not seizing on this moment as an opportunity to really solidify their dominance or maintain their monopoly. The other issue that we've been hearing about is concerns about the data that is being inputted into these machines and the way that there is just very few checks on that information. And so we're hearing concerns about automating discrimination or automating bias that may be out there in these data sets. We're also hearing concerns from creators and other artists about the ways in which some of their creations are being appropriated and creating concerns. So those are just some of the issues that we're hearing about.
Sam Altman, the chief executive of OpenAI, the company that developed ChatGPT, tweeted that the company is confident it followed the law and it will work with the FTC. Okay, I've got to ask you about Amazon. The Wall Street Journal has reported that the FTC is preparing an additional antitrust lawsuit against Amazon. How soon could we see that?
Again, I'm not able to comment on any ongoing non-public law enforcement matters.